I Want to Jump Like Dee Dee, with me, Giles Sibbald, is the music podcast that does music a bit differently. I'm talking to some incredible musicians, DJs and producers about how they use an experimental mindset to fuel their own creativity, pursue new challenges, overcome fears, bounce back from mistakes. Okay, today we're with a band who create this sort of brutal surge of electricity every time they pick up their instruments. They're really hypnotic, dangerous psychedelic rock through to brutally hypnotic song deconstructions. The music for me, it's fearless, it's intellectually stimulating. It has this, like, spaces of, you know, kind of like avant-garde and these really complex soundscapes. And for me, you know, evolution, experimentation is sort of synonymous with White Hills. So Ego and Dave of White Hills, I'm delighted to have you on, and thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Yeah.
Was that a fair description, would you say?
Well, I don't know if you can see, but it gave me goosebumps.
That's brilliant, because that took me hours to work out. No.
That was awesome.
It's approved. Can we use it for our bio?
Yeah, print it.
I mean, when I was thinking about that, you are, as you've probably heard a lot, you're so prolific. You really defy sort of genres, which I personally think is a good thing. I think that you know, kind of like in society, there's a lot of, you know, trying to put things in boxes and compartmentalize, and it's I don't find that healthy. But your evolution. And I think it was sort of particularly noticeable with the last sort of two albums, where there was more of a kind of like sort of song deconstruction. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, definitely. You know, part of it was out of necessity, and part of it was out of what, I don't know, Ego might say, my insanity. You know, it's we had, like, around 2015 when we started to tour for Walks for Motorists.
Yeah.
We started right before that, and before doing that album, we had kicked out the drummer who had been playing with us for a few years.
Yeah.
And you know, we did the album. We did Walks for Motorists in Wales. And then when we came back from doing that record, we enlisted a friend of ours from Los Angeles to take on drumming. And he toured with us for 2 years. And then he died. And
wow.
His death was a shock for both of us. And it kind of made us kind of rethink how we had been going about, you know, doing the band, and what our wants and desires were if we had someone else come in. Because the guy who played with us previously, he drummed in the band the longest out of any drummer that we've ever had, but we didn't know him any better on the day that he left than on the day that he joined.
Wow.
And that was probably, like, during our most active periods, you know, of, like, pretty much constantly touring and then recording.
Yeah.
And so to come out of that, then to bring a really good friend of ours into the fold, it was a huge difference for us touring. You know, how we felt, you know, how we felt about the show we were giving, you know, all of those things. And then so when he died, it was all like, we didn't want to go back to bringing someone in that wasn't that much a part of, like, our family.
Yeah.
You know, and so that in turn caused us to rethink how we compose,
Mm.
rethink how we perform, rethink the kind of music we want to present,
Mm.
and all of that.
It's interesting when I guess when those sort of events happen, the impact that it has, it's maybe sort of unexpected, or you don't expect. Well, it's hard to predict what kind of reaction that you get, and it has an effect on your mindset and how you approach things. I mean, going back to, I mean, I know that you guys met in San Francisco, but going back sort of before that, in terms of your kind of formative influences, either kind of events, what you lived around, what was happening in the world. I mean, what kind of do you think sort of gave you your mindset and this kind of desire to sort of create and evolve?
Do you want to go first, or do you want me to?
Well, I think
it's really hard, this one, but I struggle to. I feel bad asking this, because I think it's like really hard to kind of think back and as to your influences.
well, I think growing up, both of us were in love with music. I have older siblings who loved music, and so there was always music in my house, and that's how I learned about new bands, and it was always very exciting for me, buying new records and going to shows and doing all that kind of stuff. And and I grew up in California, and one of the first books that I read that really inspired me was Popism. It's a book about Andy Warhol.
Yeah.
And so then I learned about that whole world and the factory and the Velvet Underground, and that gave me this excitement, this passion for New York City. You jump in.
Yeah. Well, it's like, I mean, I can really pinpoint the moment when I became utterly fascinated with music. And it was, I was like 4 or 5 years old. Around that time, and not in school yet. And have very vivid memories of like my mother doing housework, and the house that I grew up in at that time it was like a ranch style home.
Yeah.
Like a very long family room. And my parents had one of those stereos that was within a cabinet.
Okay.
You would like lift up the top, and then there were speakers on the side, and then you open up another compartment, and there was the tuner. And I was fascinated with this thing. And then my mother would be cleaning, and then I would like just be looking through records. And then when I was, could figure out how to like put them on, my parents weren't really musical people. My dad was like a big band jazz guy. My mom was kind of like, grew up in that era of crooners. Being Italian from Buffalo, that was what she was into. But there were like anomaly records in there. Like they had, Jimi Hendrix Band of Gypsies. Jefferson Airplane's Bark. And Woodstock, and those were basically the 3 albums that I would pull out because they were strange covers. And I was really enamored with Jefferson Airplane. And because that cover was so weird to Bark, of a fish with human teeth. So I would put that record on, and then my mom would be doing housework, and then every once in a while she would come over and dance with me.
Wow.
And then I would just sit there, look at the cover. And then there was a guitar behind a chair that, never got used, that I would like go behind and just kind of like pluck at the strings. That was like the first moment. Yeah. But then, I grew up in just outside of San Francisco. And so, was always going into San Francisco as a child. Was always very well aware of San Francisco's musical history, like the city wore it like as a badge of honor, and just as I got older, there was always a great music scene there. And I was fortunate enough to grow up at a time where clubs weren't, you didn't have to be 18 to get into. You didn't have to be 21 to get into. So like as, you know, a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, 12-year-old kid, like I was going to see punk shows. You know, like I saw Richard Hell and the Voidoids.
Wow.
Okay. You know, like I saw Iggy Pop in like 1980. You know, I saw the Professionals.
You
know. Okay. And Steve Jones talked to me at the show, and it was like a huge thing for like this 11-year-old kid. You know? I saw the Jam on the last US tour they ever did. You know? I saw like the LA punk stuff. You know, was a huge fan of the UK subs. I saw like the classic era of Nicky Garrett. You know, you know, I even saw the Anti-Nowhere League the first time that they came over to the US because the UK subs brought them over.
Wow.
You know, so I was just always, it was a great time to grow up. I was always into art and music, and I always had access to it.
I think it's totally sort of fascinating that, like, sort of thinking back, because like for me, when like my dad was the musical one. He was kind of classically trained. You know, he was like born in 1930. You know, so, but he was never into the you know, the sort of the 60s. So he was never into kind of the Beatles. He was never into the Stones. He was more kind of classically, but he was into, you know, things like Nat King Cole, for example. And then he kind of encouraged me to sort of take up an instrument, and he wanted me to go down the kind of classical route, you know. So I went down, I picked up a cello, and I did really well at it. You know, I gave it up when I was 16 because I kind of couldn't reconcile classical music with my love of punk rock music. I just couldn't do it as a kind of 16-year-old. It was just like, no. So, and I was like, I was kind of fascinated with. I lived near to Manchester, so I was going into Manchester kind of around about probably 81. You know, so the time just sort of coming off the back of Joy Division, New Order was started. Manchester had a great scene then, and it was really just very enticing. You know, this kind of whole thing of what was going on there. There was just this allure. And I think that, like, for me, that it's hard, like, I'm like you, it's hard to pinpoint a moment, but it was just so exciting. You know, just I guess it's an evolution of your identity.
Yeah, it was dangerous too. You know, and that was a huge thrill. You know, because it's like you know, when I saw Iggy Pop, he the first time I saw him, he was supposed to be performing at a club on Market Street in San Francisco called the Cinema. And the Cinema was an on and off again porn place.
Right.
So it was like a you know, a movie cinema for porn, and then like it had strippers at one point, and then you know, when that didn't like go, you know, then they would start doing like punk shows there. Okay, so the day that I'm supposed to see Iggy Pop play at the Cinema, which was a fairly large place for punk shows at the time, it got shut down by the city. The city condemned it because it had a rodent problem.
Right.
And then they moved the show to this place called the Off Broadway, which was right above a very famous San Francisco punk club called the Mabuhay Gardens.
Yes.
Map.
I remember
that. The one place that people always talk about, right? But this was above that, and it was kind of like a cabaret type venue. It had like you know, red velvet like walls and this great like kind of half circular stage, you know, with lights going up and around the stage, and it was a lot smaller than the Cinema, and this show should have not happened. It was like the place was way overcrowded, and there was a little balcony in the space, and I was up on the balcony right next to the soundboard, and I have never seen at any show ever more beer bottles, spit, glass being thrown, bodies flying everywhere. I mean, like bottles, like just going like this, like
Just
right
crazy.
by Iggy's head, and him just standing there, not flinching,
Wow.
And it was violent. I was like, I'm going to die. I
Yeah.
can't tell you how many shows I ever saw where I thought I was going to die, but how alive that like made you feel,
Absolutely.
there's nothing to explain that kind of energy.
And,
there's nothing else I wanted to do than to be the person making that energy.
So like you guys met in San Francisco, and you were kind of amongst, I guess, what kind of people with similar mindsets to yourself, and how did meeting each other, how did that sort of impact your sort of love of music and your desire to kind of like just play?
Well, it was a long time after we met each other that we actually started to play together. Like White Hills was a while after we met.
Yeah, but at the time, we both played guitar. We were both into music. We met in a record store.
Yeah, we both had bands, part of the same
We're
scene.
both going out, seeing lots of shows. And so I think, we just had so much in common that at a certain point, it became natural for us to start playing together.
Yeah. Got you, yeah. And your kind of, I guess the kind of ethic of White Hills is pretty sort of DIY. You're involved in all aspects of kind of like the band, the creativity, like the artwork.
Yes.
The direction, etc. What's that? I mean, that must have given you, kind of like a really sort of incredible range of, kind of skills and, attributes.
True.
I guess.
Like,
I guess you don't think about it because you're just doing it, aren't you? It's like this is natural. I just do it.
Yeah.
I mean, Dave does a lot of the graphic design. Does pretty much all. I mean, we have collaborated with some artists as well,
but even still, when there's a collaboration, it's like I'm asking a specific person to do I'm asking that person because they do something that I specifically want.
Yeah.
Okay. And I trust them, like the latest record, Splinter Metal Sky. Like the guy who did the cover for it is an old friend that I used to work with at a record store in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Who is, quite an amazing artist in his own right. And I wanted something that I knew that he could do. And I just explained to him like what the album was about and, let him have the record, before it was, produced or whatever. And he just sat there and listened to the music and then constructed the cover. Out of what I told him what was the concept behind it.
Yeah.
And it ended up working out perfectly.
Well, I was going to ask about collaborations, either, kind of art or in whatever sort of aspects. I guess the past sort of couple of records has seen more collaborations for you. Is that fair to say as well?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, we had on Splinter Metal Sky, we collaborated with a few people. We collaborated with Jim Jarmusch.
Yeah.
Added guitar and theremin.
But that song has not been released yet.
Yeah. That's coming up.
Yeah, it's coming up. And Jim Coleman from Human Impact.
And he was in Cop Shoot Cop.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then Simone.
And then you had Simone.
Yeah.
Simone as well, yeah.
And Yasmine.
Yeah. I mean, she's a very stylistically on her own, very different, to what you're doing.
Yes. But she's actually the one that inspired us.
Interesting.
To collaborate with all these people.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
she was she comes to New York fairly often, and we met up for dinner one time when she came into town, and I was telling her about, we were starting kind of working on the songs for the new record and discussing it with her, and she said, did you ever think about collaborating with people on your songs? And we haven't really, we've done collaborations in the past, but not exactly in this way.
Yeah, not like White Hills and then, okay, you know, it's like the stuff with Nod, it's always been like both of us.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
Versus like, okay, this is White Hills proper, and now we're bringing someone into White Hills proper. You know, versus like, yeah, the other way of like kind of two entities meeting heads. You know.
So what was when she suggested that? What was your kind of gut reaction to that suggestion?
Like never really thought about
that.
Yeah.
I wasn't at the dinner, and then you know when Ego came home later, she was all like, oh yeah, you know, Yasmine was wondering about if we were going to collaborate with anyone, and then I was kind of like, well, maybe we should ask Yasmine.
Yeah.
You know,
which you know, it's such a great collaboration, I think, with Yasmine, especially because her music is so different from ours. Her style is so different, but the song that we chose for her to add to was something that it has like a little more emotional content to it. And that's like the beauty of her work, is that her voice is so expressive.
Yeah.
So it added a dimension that we haven't had.
Yeah.
Before.
Yeah, and you know, I think everybody that we worked with on this record really took the songs and made them so much better.
Yeah.
Not that they weren't good beforehand, but just that everybody seemed to like really nail like what they did. And you know, we really didn't give anybody any direction at all. You know, it was like after Yasmine, like everybody else that we started asking, we were just like, you know, we'll send you 3 songs. If you feel emotionally close to something, like do that. If you feel emotionally close to all 3 of them, do something to all 3 of them. If you don't feel emotionally close to any of it, let us know if you're still interested in wanting to do something, and we'll send you other stuff. You know, so it was like, you know, we sent like Jarmusch 2 songs, and he loved them both, and did stuff on both of them. One of those songs we haven't used yet. Simone, we sent Simone 3 songs, and she actually sang on all 3 songs. Unfortunately, she did do a vocal track for Now Manhattan, but we had already mixed it by the time that she had given us the vocal.
Got you.
So her vocal didn't get added in because
that didn't get added in.
We were on to other stuff. So there's also a song that from those sessions that Simone sings on that we haven't used yet as well. And then like with Jim Coleman, the song Numbers was a pretty loose sketch of a song at that point. And when Jim wrote back to us, he was all like, he goes, I have an idea for what you sent me. Do you mind if I edit the song to fit in with this idea that I have? I was like, yeah, sure, go ahead. You know, do whatever you want. And I really think that Jim really made the song Numbers. You know, and like the vocal vocal on Numbers, it was like after Jim did what he did and then sent us like the mix that he did for us to listen to. Like I listened to it and then I plugged a microphone in and I just sang. And that those words were not written beforehand. That's exactly what came out of my mouth at the moment, that very first time singing to it. And we ended up just using that vocal from that time as the vocal for the final mix. You know, so
and that just sort of felt instinctively right, the right way to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And then, you know, I tried to sing it over in the studio and I was like, this isn't working. And then you know, the engineer that we were working with just said, let's just use the other vocal. You know, he's all like, he goes, you recorded it fine enough, you know, it's like we can mess with it. So he goes, you know,
I think those are brilliant, you know, kind of examples of great kind of collaboration where, and especially, you know, kind of where you maybe hadn't thought of it before, and the idea is sort of pitched, and you know, you just kind of embrace it. You just take it on and say, okay, let's give it a go. I mean, I think there's, you know, from what I've seen, there's seemed to have been, maybe it's, you know, because of COVID, you know, there's been a lot more kind of collaborations because it's been perhaps more necessity and it's perhaps been easier to do, you know, kind of getting people together. Some have felt like they've been done for the sake of it, but I think there's been some others where the, you know, you know, kind of like you said, you know, it adds that sort of extra dimension. I was talking to a sort of friend of mine yesterday. He's a guy called Dave Randall. He was the guitarist in Faithless. And his current kind of collective that he works with, Barbarella, the vocalist, she's got an amazing voice. And in one song that they do, she switches from this kind of like Gwen Stefani-like vocal to opera within the song. I mean, it's just incredible. It's the least expected thing. And it just, and I think, you know, that those really, you know, kind of open up a song and kind of like, you know, give something to the listener can be totally unexpected. I think they're fantastic. But on the other side, they can be risky as well.
Yeah, it's like you know, when I was talking with Jim Jarmusch after he gave us like his tracks. There was in the song Illusion, there was this one part of the feedback guitar that he did that he loved. He was all like, oh, you know, I did this like bending, you know, with the whammy bar, because I really love the way it's like, and to be honest, like when I first heard the track on its own, I was all like, ooh, I don't know if that's gonna work, you know? And I didn't say that to him. And he said, he goes, I have no ego involved in this. He's all like, whatever you want to do with it, you do whatever you want with it. He's all like, I'm just glad you guys asked me, you know, to do something, and I was, you know, happy to oblige. And then as we started to put his part into the song, it became apparent that actually that was the brilliant part of what he did. And then I ended up accentuating that part by editing it and having that aspect of it in there more than the parts that you know, the other parts that he had done for the song. So, yeah, it's I think you just have to be open. You know, you have to like let your ego go.
Yeah.
You know,
and let your plans go.
Exactly.
It's very true. Yeah.
And you just you need to get rid of this a conceit and an idea of what perfection is, you know, because it's like, in my opinion, imperfection is perfection. Okay, you know, like I've always been a person that never liked doing a lot of takes of something.
Yeah.
If when I listen back to my music, like I hear all the mistakes.
Yeah.
And I only know they're mistakes because I did it.
Yeah.
Okay. And I know what I wanted to in my mind, and I know what was going on when I did it. But I think that those imperfections is what makes it perfect, because that's what gives it its life.
Yeah.
You know, and if I achieved what that perfection was in my mind at that moment, I can guarantee you I wouldn't like that track as much as I like it with its imperfection.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, have you ever read Brian Eno's like bio?
No, I haven't.
It's
No.
like
No.
it's something like a year in the life
Mm.
or something. But in the book, he talks about working with Bowie and about how Bowie was always into the mistakes as well.
Yeah.
And he would never like doing a lot of tracks over and over again. But Eno was always perfection. He had to do it over and over again. And he talked about how, like, at times, how difficult that was for him to work with.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's like, you should, if you haven't in a while, go back and listen to the album Low.
Yeah.
And listen to it with headphones on. There are mistakes on the guitar all over the place on that record that you don't necessarily hear because you've heard the song so much. But if you're listening to it on headphones and like focusing in on the guitar, you can hear when the guitarist flubs. You can hear when he tried to hit a note and the note it was dead. You know,
it's kind of
amazing.
It's kind of, I mean, this is great. I mean, this is, you know, because you know, going with that, I mean, it shows the, you know, kind of fallibility of human beings. You know that, you know, and I think, you know, people do get, you know, generally in life get really sort of hung up on perfection or try to get as close to sort of perfect as they can, which to my mind leads to a fear of making mistakes, you know, getting things wrong, and it kind of like creates a inertia, you know, that you can't move forward because you're so scared of, like, well, what if I screw that up? It's like, oh my God, it's, you know, so kind of like embracing those flaws and kind of imperfections, you know, paradoxically are the way that you make progress, that you create, and you then use those, and it's like this whole kind of thing of experimenting and experimental mindset. You take those, you learn from it, and then use it the next time you're creating.
Yeah, it's like, what is it? There's like, I don't know, I won't get the quote right, but it's like something like, you can't learn unless you fail.
Yeah,
you have to
know,
fail
you have
more.
To fail.
You have
and
to
you
fail
have to fail
all the
and
time.
fail,
all the time,
fail and fail.
So interesting on that. So like, if in your, you know, whatever kind of process you're kind of going through, you know, when you find something that you're not happy with, or not entirely, I mean, I guess it's maybe slightly different, but, you know, you make a mistake. Do you go back to the drawing board, or you just pretty much, your philosophy is you embrace it, or, you know, kind of, obviously if there's a complete mistake, then sure, but, you know, do you know, how does it make you feel when you kind of like have to go back to the drawing board, for example?
I don't, well,
Would you
we
go
were
back to the drawing board
about this the other day, like when
The
you were saying,
video?
well, no, when you were saying like, oh, you know, you when I was talking about that new thing I was working on and how I was like, and then you're like, oh, just like let it sit there for a while. You'll do what you always do. You'll come back to it and you'll be like, why did I stop working on this? This is brilliant.
Yeah, 'cause this
You know?
is the thing. We'll work on a new song and we're working on it. And Dave, at a certain point, at first he's very excited, and then it's like, I don't know, I hate it. Let's move on. And then, periodically we go back and we listen to things that we worked on in the past. And he'll hear that same thing and say, oh, this is great. Why don't we do this? And so actually, this is something that I've integrated a few years ago. I started doing this where go through periods of writing music. Like sometimes we'll write music individually. Just like spend time, you exercise your skills. You just write songs. And so I'll do a thing where I write a song a day for 2 months. A song a day. It doesn't have to, it just has to have some semblance of being a song, like
a structure, some sort of, yeah.
Write it, put it away. Don't listen to it. So then after a few weeks, then what you do is you go back and you listen to your ideas, and that way you have fresh ears and things jump out at you that you really like. Things jump out that sound really interesting, and other things don't sound interesting, but then you have a better sense of, this is an idea that is really interesting to me that I would like to work on more. When you hammer away at an idea, you lose the perspective. You have no idea, does this sound good or is this crap? Who knows?
I find that, when I'm working on stuff alone, like the things that I consistently think are great are the things that came the easiest and the fastest. And it's, more often than not, that is not the case.
Yeah.
Okay. But, the other things, and then after that, like I find the things that I hated the most when I did it are the things that I like the most when I haven't listened to it, versus the things that like I've been really working on hard to hammer out.
Yeah.
I
was going to say, how do you you sort of touched on it. How do you feel, looking back? I don't know, sort of 10 years, at the stuff that you created then, because that's a moment in time. That's what you created based on what you were feeling. Right then. How does that make you feel when you look back at that at those creations?
I feel proud.
Yeah.
I feel really proud of everything that made it onto record. I think we're pretty discerning about, there's a lot of things that don't make it onto a recording.
We have hard drives.
They're sitting on the little Edirol or the hard drive or a phone, So
there for me, being the person who has mixed a lot of it, there are things that I listen to that I'd be like, oh, I wish I had access to the gear that I have access to now. I would have mixed this differently now, knowing what I know now versus what I knew then, versus the kind of gear I was working with then. It's those things.
Yeah.
But I don't ever necessarily feel a need to go back and fix them, because it's like, it's what it was. And that
I agree. I mean, I do like that quote from Nelson Mandela, who said, it's about, you only need to see how much you've changed by going back to a place that you haven't been to for a long time, and that place hasn't changed, to see how much you changed as an individual.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of like really interesting to sort of see how you've evolved as a person, whether that's through, you know, what you want from your life, what your you know, kind of what you're interested in, what your abilities are, and things like that. I think that's kind of quite sort of interesting.
Yeah.
You know, sort of way to look at it. What about you know, sort of differentiation? You know, these days, it's I feel it's kind of hard to. There's a lot of people trying to sort of differentiate, and I guess with sort of social media, it becomes a very sort of this sort of competitive, you know, kind of world. How, do you think differentiation is kind of important?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just think you just need to be who you are,
Mm,
and like what you do. You know, it's like we've always talked about this. Um, Having done all the touring and traveling that we've done, and
yeah,
seeing all the different kinds of bands that we've played with, and
yeah,
you know, for years we've always been, there is no band like White Hills. You know,
yeah,
White Hills is White Hills.
yeah, yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
people, you know, there are people who are into stoner rock that associate us as a stoner band. There are people who are into psychedelic music that
Mm,
associate us as a psychedelic band. You know, goth, whatever.
mm, mm,
But it's like, um, we've just aspired to just be ourselves.
yeah, yeah,
You know, and I think if you have a vision of what you want to do,
yeah.
and you just dive into it,
Mm, mm,
like, and it's coming from here, you know, it's not
yeah,
coming from here so much,
mm,
it's coming from your heart, from your soul. I
yeah,
think, you know, you will be different.
yeah, yeah,
You know, I mean, you could be playing punk music, but it's from here, and that's
yeah,
different than somebody who is playing it from here,
yeah,
and it's
yeah,
all like, oh, was the Ramones, and this is what the Ramones did, and it's like, I love the Ramones, and it's like, that's what I'm going to do,
yeah, yeah.
you know.
Mm.
So I
I
we
agree.
wanted to be someone else or something else.
I mean, I think that's one thing that has sort of come through in your music. You know, sort of really come through over the years is the you know, kind of like the authenticity behind it, and authenticity is a word that is used a lot these days. I do think that, but it's very relevant, I think, for the world that we live in now. And also relatability as well. Your music is very kind of like relatable, you know, with the lyrics that sort of come through. And again, I think that is very possibly sort of overlooked as a differentiator. You know, how relatable you are as a band. And I've really kind of sensed this over the last maybe 2-3 years. And maybe it's the, I don't know, kind of world that we live in, the political environment that we live in, you know, where there's well, you know what it's like, you know. But I think that, you know, music is this amazing tool for kind of like human connection. And you know, when you kind of give that relatability out, then that connection just happens and it stays. It doesn't disappear.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Mm,
You know, it's like, you can think what you want of Chris Robinson from the Black Crowes, but
mm,
he has this great quote that I read once, where he was talking about kind of like, someone was asking him about the Black Crowes, and like, you know, how he felt about the band, and you know, like the,
mm,
you know, people comparing them to the Small Faces, or
mm,
or Humble Pie, I mean, and the Rolling Stones, and his response was, he goes, we are just one continuation of the song. Then the interviewer was like, what do you mean? And he said, we're just one part of that very first song that humans ever made.
Yeah.
And ever since then, every song since then is just a continuation of that human connection to the song. And I was all like, when I read that, I was like, White Hills is like that.
It's like that, yeah.
You know, it's like we aren't out there saying that, we're what we have done hasn't been done before.
Yeah.
But we are doing it in our way, with our signature, from our hearts. And therefore, we are a continuation of the song.
I was when I was sort of preparing for this, I was reading an interview, and you talked about a guy that came to, I think you're in Oslo. You're touring. You're playing in Oslo, and a guy who worked for an oil company had flown from Africa to come and see you.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, then there's this kind of like contradiction there of somebody who's, working in the corporate world, working in an industry where you're writing, one of your really kind of famous songs about that industry, and but there's that kind of contradiction, and I think that there must be lots of those kind of people that are kind of working and then hearing this music and connecting with it, and that's the power that you can bring to it.
Yeah, I mean, you never know where your music is going to land and who is going to be inspired by your music.
Yeah,
it's like so many bands out there do fit in a very particular type of scene, and so they have a certain type of fan.
Yeah.
I call those they're lifestyle bands.
Yeah, the lifestyle thing. It's maybe it's like the jean vest.
Yeah, how everything's a lifestyle now, right? All marketing is lifestyle. So it's like they're people who want the lifestyle.
Yeah, I mean, and it may be some bands do make a choice to be in that place, and some people, we've toured with lots of bands that are kind of surprised by why their audience is this one particular kind of group of people. Anyway, my point being is that we've found over the years, people we see at shows, people that get in touch with us, there are all these like a whole like different crazy group of people.
Just a big spectrum.
Super duper straight people too. I'm very surprised that are into White Hills.
Like people in the military.
I mean, I wonder that if there's something inside those people that's clamoring to kind of get out.
Yeah, I don't know.
You kind of hit something and they want to get out, but they're kind of stuck in this world, this other world almost.
Well, I think maybe they're just responding to the energy of the music. I don't know how much people listen to our lyrics. I mean, I think some people do, and I think a lot of people don't really listen to lyrics.
I always find it interesting, like when people write about lyrics and where they what they get out of what's being said. And the lyrics are quite vague a lot of the times, and I do that on purpose. To not be so pointed,
Is that so people can make their own interpretation?
No, I've just always been like, I've just always been into surreal imagery.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like we played a show once in San Francisco, and this guy came up afterwards and was like talking to me, and he was really focused on the lyrical content of the music. And he said, do you read a lot of science fiction? I was like, no, I don't read any science fiction. He's all like, oh, you've never read J.G. Ballard? Oh, no. At that point, I hadn't, you know? And he's all like, oh, your lyrics, like, you know, I was convinced that you were an avid reader of Ballard. No. He's all like, where do you get your lyrical inspiration from? I said, well, more than anything, from the poetry of Jim Carroll.
Yeah.
You know, because it's like he had a great way, just a great way with words. Putting words together and creating an image, you know. And the guy was all like, he was totally miffed. Just like, I can't believe that.
That was his kind of theory, sort of blown out of the water.
Yeah. That's why, children, never meet your idols.
Fantastic. Well, listen, Dave and Igor, thank you so much for coming on and having the chat. It's been absolutely fascinating. It's been wonderful talking to you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Really got a lot from it. Thanks so much. All right, take care, guys. See you soon.
Thanks for listening to the show, and I really hope that you enjoyed it and that you'll tune in for the next episode. In the meantime, it would be really awesome if you could rate and review the show and also share it with any friends who you think might enjoy it.